Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Ward and want to welcome all of you fight fans to our next installment of Title Unboxed. In our first episode, we were able to gain some insights and share the screen with the one and only Sugar Ray Leonard. So now we're happy to call on another one of the Fabulous Four and a man who is one, if not the greatest lightweight champion of all time.
Welcome to Title Unboxed. With more than 40 years of experience in the fight game, our host, Doug Ward, will be covering every corner of the ring as we get comfortable between the ropes. We'll talk with both the lesser knowns and the legends, discuss boxing's rich history and current state of the game. We'll also look at today's latest innovations, equipment breakdowns, and insights you won't uncover anywhere else. Join us now as we take a look inside Title Unboxed.
It is my honor to welcome to our podcast Mano de Piedra, Hands of Stone, Roberto Durán. Hola, ¿cómo está?
Bien, bien, gracias, thank you.
And because that's the extent of my Spanish, I'll also introduce Robin to the program. He's going to be translating for us and also joining in the conversation. Welcome, Robin.
All right, great. Thanks. I'm very happy to be here as well.
Great, appreciate it. Well, you had a little bit of a health scare here recently. End of June 26th, it was announced that you had coronavirus. Can you explain what that situation was like, what you felt, how that came about?
Bueno, yo estoy bien.
Well, first of all, he did get the virus. However, he thinks it was all blown out of proportion because he had it, but he felt like he had a mild cold. He didn't feel as bad. And as soon as he got the first symptoms, we rushed him to the hospital just to make sure that he was okay. But nevertheless, he never felt, very compromised health-wise. The major symptom he had was like that of like the common cold.
Right. Well, you look good. You bounced back, fought like a champ, I'm sure.
Dice que rebotó como un campeón de esta.
Dile que yo no quiero pegarle al saco, dile.
He says that he knocked out coronavirus like he hits the punching bag.
Okay, so let's get into your early days. You were born and raised in the slums of Panama, right? It was La Casa de Piedra, the House of Stone. Can you explain what it was like? Just paint a picture of you growing up.
Well, back in the day where he was born, even though it was, the ghetto, it wasn't as rough as it is today. He actually felt that even though that it was the slums, as you say, there were still good people where he was growing up in that area of the Chorrillo. Even though that he was in the slums and it wasn't as bad back in the day as it is now, they were very poor. So he had to go out every day and try to make, living and sell newspapers or whatever just to get by. But, he always managed. He always managed to get some money to bring home food to the house.
El real que yo cogía, yo siempre iba al mercado a cargar bolsa. El real que yo cogía era para la casa, para la comida de la casa. Así que siempre estábamos bien ahí.
Well, he did so many things. He even worked in the supermarket, carrying the bags. And whatever penny he had or whatever, coin he made, he took it home to his mom so they can buy food. But every day he made sure that, they weren't missing, a plate on the table.
Right. So do you remember the first time you went to a boxing gym? What drew you there? How did you end up there? Do you remember that experience?
That the first time he actually went into a boxing gym, it was by mistake because he was not a boxer. He was never thinking about being a boxer. His brother was a fighter, and he went with him. And then he saw it, and he just fell in love with the whole scenery. And then that's when he wanted to become a boxer.
So there was some controversy in your amateur career about what your record actually was. They all seem to agree that you lost your first 3 fights, but some say that your record was 29-3, 18-3, 13-3. Do you recall what your record was?
He doesn't recall very well, the amateur record. However, he says that he didn't lose the 3 first fights, but he doesn't remember exactly. It's been such a long time that he doesn't recall. But he's for sure that he didn't lose the first 3 fights.
That part is not true.
He says that he does recall losing a fight to a fighter last name Maina, But he says, I was not only fighting mine, I was fighting the whole family because the referee was his uncle, the judges were his aunts, and it was like a big family fighting against him.
Yo nada más perdí. Que yo sé una sola pelea más,
He can say for sure, and he's certain that he lost one amateur fight.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's still pretty good. So then you turned pro at 16, which I guess in the U.S. here would be pretty young, but not so much there, right?
Desde los 12 años.
Yeah, he says that you've been fighting since you're 12 years old here in Panama.
En Panamá se pelea a cualquier edad.
You can fight at any age.
had the experience and the ring mastery. So I want to show you a picture here of somebody that was pretty influential in your career. Can you see who that is there?
Yeah, this be Ray Arcel.
With Ray Arcel. Can you tell me a little bit about what influenced? I mean, this guy trained Barney Ross, Henry Armstrong, Benny Leonard. I mean, his resume is like a list of just great world champions. Can you remember what influence he had on your career and how that relationship started?
Bueno, yo prácticamente lo único que yo es que a mí, francamente, a mí Ray Arcel no me entrenó. A mí me entrenó fuera Roberto Durán era el que me entrenaba, pero no era Ray Arcel.
Well, even though Ray Arcel was part of his team, the person that did train him, that was with him in the training camp, was Freddie Brown, and Plomo was with him.
Sí.
But, Ray Arcel,
Dile que Ray Arcel nada más llegaba una semana antes de la pelea y me decía que yo estaba en buenas condiciones, más nada.
Ray would come into the fight, pre-fight 1 week before, and look at him and saying, looking good, champ, good conditions.
Otra cosa que él decía que a mí no me tenía que enseñar nada porque dice que a ellos lo sabía todo. Yo era muy vivo practicando y peleando.
And Ray would tell him, there's little for me to teach you because you already know it all. You're very smart. And when I see you training and when I see you fighting, there's very little I can teach you.
Well, he did say that, and I want to read you a quote that Ray Arcel said, and I'll break it down so you can translate as I go. He said, "Nobody had to teach Duran how to fight. The first day I saw him in Panama, I told everyone around him, don't change his style." He also said, leave him alone. I don't want anyone to ever tell him what to do. Let him fight.
Eso es lo que le decía Freddy Brown a Ray Arcel, que yo era muy vivo en el ring, que él no tenía nada que enseñarme. Solamente era ponerme en condiciones.
Yeah, that's what they were talking. We speak among them, Freddie Brown and Ray Arcel, that they had nothing to teach him, but just to make sure that they would get him in shape for the fight. Yeah. That was their main goal, just to get him in shape.
Porque Freddie Brown se quedaba 1 mes y 2 meses conmigo en los entrenamientos. Y cada día que él me veía.
That, Freddie Brown will be with him 2 months in the training camp, sleeping over there, and then when Ray would come in, they would be in a separate room. They would go and talk among themselves and, talk about the training and how's it been. And the Ray would tell him, I saw him sparring today and there's nothing to teach him. He's fine. He's in good conditions. And, let him be. Just leave him be.
Ray Arcel le decía a Freddy Brown que a mí era muy difícil pegarme en la cara. Y él veía que el golpe venía aquí, ya mi cara ya no estaba ahí. Y dice que eso no lo aprende todo el mundo.
And Ray would tell Freddie Brown that it was so hard to hit him in the face because when Duran saw the punch coming through his face, he was already, ducking it. And that was a skill that very few fighters had back in the day.
Y la poca brecha que yo tengo en la casa son cabezazos, no, nunca han sido.
And most of the cuts he had throughout his career were headbutts. They were rarely punches.
You are a great defensive fighter, and I don't think people talk about that often enough. They'll talk about Mayweather and how great he is defensively, but you were able to stand in the pocket and make people miss you, and that was part of your offense, was having such a great defense.
Yo tenía mucha defensa.
That he considered himself a very smart fighter because he already anticipated every move his opponent would make. He knew that when he hit him, where to hit next or where his opponent was going to hit him. And whenever they would get him into the rope, he knew how to bounce it or turn it around to get his opponent in the ropes and he get out. So he was very smart fighter, and that's one thing that many fighters don't have.
A mí prácticamente, a mí no me enseñó nadie. Yo aprendí solamente con ver y cómo tirar los ganchos, cómo tirar los jabs, cómo salíame. Porque Panamá tiene una escuela de boxeo que no la tiene ningún otro país del mundo.
You know that one thing that he wants to get straight out is that, you know, nobody taught him how to fight. He taught himself by looking, because back in the day in Panama was such a force in boxing, and he learned watching other fighters and the know-how the Panamanian fighters had. You know, it was very challenging for other countries in the world to have.
Dile que yo podía tener la guardia abajo a 6 pulgadas del boxeador. Y cuando el boxeador tiraba, yo lo tapaba con el hombro.
You know, he could have his guards down and, you know, be very close to another fighter, 6 inches away from another fighter. And when the other fighter would throw his punches, he would already block it with his shoulder. He had so many different ways of, you know, having a great defense, and he already knew it because that's how smart he was in the ring.
A cualquier otro lo hubiera noqueado. Si hace lo que yo hacía, cualquiera lo hubiera noqueado.
It was very likely that if any other fighter would do that trick, would be knocked out, but he knew.
Y actualmente, y pasado el tiempo, nadie tiene la defensa que tengo yo.
And he says that, you know, even back in the day and now, it's very hard. And he thinks that nobody has the defense that he had in the ring.
Dile que yo fui a Denver, Colorado, a entrenar a Tyson, y me puse a practicar con un muchacho ahí, y el tipo se puso bravo porque no podía pegar.
You know, even though, you know, after his retirement and when he was out of boxing, he went to Denver, Colorado because he was training with Mike Tyson. And, you know, one of the guys there said, hey, Durán, let's spar for a bit. And he said, all right, let's do it. And the other guy got so mad and so frustrated that he wasn't able to hit him as being an elder man, that the guy just stormed out of the ring, very upset because he wasn't able to hit him, even though he was already older and he was already retired and he was not even fighting.
Dile que me estoy recordando de un boxeador que iba a pelear en el mismo programa de Tyson. Y yo me puse los guantes con el tipo más grande que yo, me puse los guantes con él. Y el tipo no me tocó. Y el día siguiente, el tipo se fue porque dice, si no le pegué a ese, mejor que yo me vaya. Y se fue desde medio Colorado.
And then when in Denver, one of the undercards, you know, he's like, yeah, I'm going to hit Durán because he's old already. This was very recent.
Y no peleó esa noche.
And he said, you know, he's like, I'm going to spar Durán. Since he wasn't even able to hit him, he got so frustrated and he left. And he said, like, if I can hit an old Durán, how am I supposed to fight pro? So the guy just retired and he left and he didn't take the fight or anything.
So you went 31 fights on a 31 fight win streak. And then you met Esteban de Jesus, this gentleman right here. Now he was the first man to ever knock you down. Do you remember that moment? Do you remember that fight?
Esa fue en el Madison Square Garden. El gancho que él me metió no fue que me hizo daño en la mandíbula, fue que me metió en el hígado y después me la subió arriba. Ese fue el gancho que más daño me hizo a mí, pero no fue el de la quijada.
Well, you know that, you know, one of the things that people think that he was knocked out with the hook to the chin. He says that he was hurt before that. He was hurt with the hook to the liver. And then Esteban brought it up to the chin. You know, the hook to the liver was the one that hurt him. Even though that happened, he says he didn't feel like he lost a fight. He says it was a very close fight. However, it was New York, you know, it was a boxing commission. Most of the boxing commissions were Puerto Ricans, and they were obviously rooting for a second championship fight. Sure. Bigger prize money, bigger. So that's what he feels like. However, he says that the punch that really hurt him was the hook to the liver.
Y dile que entonces yo le di a mi madre que me conseguí la revancha. Y Carlos Deleta me consiguió la revancha en Panamá. Y el hombre vuelve y me tumba con el mismo gancho, dile.
And it's funny that after that, he tells his manager, you know, just get me the rematch because I need to win this. And just make sure that you bring the fight to Panama because we fought in New York and it was his hometown. Now we're going to fight in Panama, in my turf. And then I was all pumped up, and then the guy hits me with the same hand, and he brings me down in Panama with the same hand.
Cuando yo me paro, yo le hago así a mi entrenador, como que dice, le hice así, como que dice, eso no es nada. y me puse más fuerte. Cada vez que pasaba un asalto, yo me ponía más fuerte porque me daba rabia, pero pensando, siempre más fuerte y más fuerte y más fuerte, y tiraba los golpes con más fuerza todavía.
You know, it's funny that after that happened in the early rounds when Esteban brought him down, he looked over to his corner. He started laughing like, you know, it's nothing. I'm fine. I'm fine. But then as the round progresses, he got so mad and so pissed, and he got strong and strong, and he just wanted to beat him because, you know, he had dishonored him in his own hometown, and he was stronger, and he just wanted to, you know, just beat him out right there in the ring.
Era un boxeador completo, era fuerte de arriba y abajo. Yo tenía que pegarle abajo, tenía que pegarle arriba, buscando cómo poder derribarlo, a sacarle la fortaleza, porque tenía mucha fortaleza. Pero los golpes le entraban por todos lados porque era muy fuerte.
He says that, you know, Esteban was a very strong fighter, very complete fighter. You know, he had great defense, very great. You know, he was a very offensive fighter as well. It was very hard to hit him. But what he did is he started working him in every angle he could. Hit him with lower punches to the face, to the sides, you know, just to make sure that he could hit him, because Esteban was a very great and very complete fighter.
Porque la mejor mano que tenía de Jesús era la mano izquierda, y se la eliminé por completamente. Cuando ya yo le eliminé la mano izquierda, ya no sabía qué hacer.
Esteban de Jesus' best punch was his left hand. Once he neutralized that hand, he was already a beat man, because Esteban didn't know what to do after his main weapon was canceled.
Took that away from him, yeah. Well, he did come back and beat him 2 consecutive times after that to revenge that first loss.
Después fuimos a pelear a La Vega, y él vino con el mismo estilo, pero como ya yo lo conocía, lo eliminé más rápido.
And then when they went to fight for the third time in Vegas, Esteban came with the same style, the same fight pattern, and he already knew it by hand. So, you know, that was easier for him to win that fight.
Le dije yo a él, me acuerdo, le dije, ahora no estamos en Panamá, ahora te voy a noquear más rápido ahora, le dije.
He says, we're not in Panama, now I'm going to knock you out faster.
Y así fue.
And, you know, that's how it ended out.
Porque él vino con el mismo estilo, no cambió. Nunca cambió su estilo.
He came with the same style. He never changed the way he fought.
La ventaja que yo tenía que con cada boxeador que yo peleaba, yo le conocía el estilo y yo le cambiaba, mi estilo se lo cambiaba.
You know, one of the advantages that he had as being Roberto Durán is that he could figure it out, any boxing style that was against him. And then when he figured it out, it was so easy for him to beat the opponents, because they were just like, you know, punching bags. Once he already got the way they fought, and he would move around and would drop his hands and just punch it, because once he figured out the way his opponent would fight, it was a piece of cake.
Por eso cuando yo hacía amateur, mire, no, cuando yo practicaba, se llenaba los gimnasios porque veía que cada vez en práctica sacaba muchas formas de cómo jugar con los boxeadores que eran buenos, fuertes boxeadores y buenos pegadores, pero no me podían hacer nada. Se llenaban los gimnasios en el Estados Unidos solamente por verme entrenar.
You know, that's why his training sessions were so popular, because they will see new skills every time they see him. And even though he had very strong sparring partners, he would just play with them. And that's why mainly in the United States, the gyms were like so crowded every time he was doing his sparring session. It was just a show. It was a show. It was spectacular just to see him train.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was going to bring that up, because I have that picture right there of you training, hitting the speed bag. People come to watch you jump rope, where you do the deep dips and hit the speed bag with your head. I mean, it really was a show. You really put on a spectacular performance every training session, and it drew crowds every time.
Dile que eso yo lo aprendí de un boxeador que él conoció, que se llama Ismael Laguna. Ese ha sido siempre mi ídolo. Y yo aprendí a saltar soga nada más con velo a él. Aprendí a saltar soga, y con velo aprendí a pegarle a la pera con la cabeza también.
He says that a cool fact is that he learned those tricks from a Panamanian fighter who was his idol, Ismael Laguna. And just by looking at him, the way he did the dips in the rope and the way he would hit the speed back with the head, he learned from him. And that was his favorite fighter of all time was Ismael Laguna from Panama.
Porque dile que Laguna era un choque, mucha gente se llenaba los gimnasios. Por verlo entrar a él, porque era un show, y yo copié, todo lo copié, yo nada más con B.
He says Ismael Laguna was a showman, and people would come into the gym just to see him train. And he copied that style, and he made his own. And that's why he thinks that his training sessions were such a spectacle.
Fun to watch. Definitely fun to watch, especially even all the videos on YouTube and all that, pouring through those. There's something new each time. So after you won the WBA lightweight world title by stopping Jimmy Robertson, I think it was KO in the fifth round, you began another win streak that lasted 41 bouts, which is almost unheard of. There are some professional fighters that don't even have 41 bouts throughout their entire career. Do you remember that fight and what that experience was like?
You know that it got to a point that he got lazy because he was winning and nobody wanted to fight him. And the fights that he feels that he lost was because he didn't want to train. He had lost motivation. And, he would gain weight, balloon himself, and then it would be very hard for him to make the weight. Mm-hmm. And most of the managers of his opponents would wait for him to be fat, and then they will offer the fight just to make sure that, he was not trained properly for that fight. And that's why he says that he feels like he lost the fights that he lost, were because he didn't train properly or he was making the weight, because he never, ever in his life lost a weight in the scale. I lost a fight in the scale. He always made the scale no matter what weight he was, no matter how weak he was, and no matter how much it cost him to make the weight, he always made the weight in the scale.
Una vez viene Cocolo, ¿cómo se llama? Cocolo que vive ahora en Mario, le dice a mi hijo, a Chavito, le dice, ¿tú sabes por qué tu papá no es más grande? Porque es más grande lo que es. Chavo le dice a él, ¿por qué? ¿De qué? Porque tu papá es un boxeador que apenas termina de pelear, se va para un bar a beber. Y nosotros los boxeadores, cuando terminamos de pelear, nos vamos a descansar para sacarnos los golpes. Entonces, tu papá está hecho de hierro. ¿De qué está hecho tu papá?
He says that, Marvin told my brother Chavo, Marvin Hagler, he says, you know what's so crazy about your father is that, us fighters, when the fight is over, we go home, we go, we eat, we rest, we want to get those punches and all the hurt out of the body. Your father goes to the bar and he goes out and he parties and has a drink. He's made of steel. That's the difference between him and us. We go home, we rest, he parties. And that's what he did all his life. He says that's why he feels that the lost fights he had in his career were because he was not trained properly and he was out of weight.
Cuando yo estaba en muy buena condición, nadie quería pelear conmigo, nadie.
When he was in tip-top conditions, nobody wanted to fight him, and it was very hard for somebody to beat him.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring up Marvin Hagler because I think it's an interesting note to really make it clear that although he's forever linked with Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, the Fabulous Four, really without that, that's a second chapter in his career as far as I'm concerned. He could have quit there and retired as the greatest, if not one of the greatest lightweights of all time. And so I think people get lost. They mix him in with those guys, and that's not always indicative of what his career meant to boxing.
Sí, yo comencé cuando ya no podía hacer más a 135 libras, yo comencé a subir de peso. Para pelear con otros campeones mundiales, que eso es lo que quería yo.
Because, he wants to get it out and explain to people that it was a point in his life that he wasn't able to make 135 pounds. It was impossible for him. But in a way, that helped him because he wanted to go up in weight and fight with the bigger guys. That was his goal. And he no longer found any opponents for him in the 135. And he wanted to go up in weight and fight the big guys.
Y la cabeza, yo me quedaba hasta un año sin pelear y me aburría de entrenar. Y entonces, porque nadie quería pelear conmigo, entonces cuando me veían gordo, era que me daban a pelear por un título, por lo que sea, porque me veían gordo y como tenía tanto tiempo que no entrenaba, creía que me iban a noquear, porque noquear y ganar a Roberto Durán es como sacarse la lotería.
He had a time that a year would pass by and he wasn't able to make a fight in the 135. Nobody wanted to fight him. There were no opponents, and they would wait for him to get weight and then try to make a fight. Nobody even wanted to spar him. So he was bored of the 135 division because nobody wanted to fight him. And they knew that, and if he was training, it was worse because he was in tip-top condition. Nobody wanted to fight him, so he had to move up in weight.
Right. Hard to be consistent when you don't have something on the horizon. So when you moved up to fight Leonard had all the name, he had the recognition, he had the fame. Did you want to fight him more, or was it more for the title?
Yo me acuerdo cuando mi manager, Carlos Deleta, me dice a mí, Durán, te tengo una pelea por el campeonato mundial. Ya yo era campeón de las 135 libras.
It says that his manager calls him up and says, "Hey, Roberto, listen, he was already, champion of the 135. And he says, Durán, this is a fighter, guy, very popular. He's right now the hot stuff, the best fighter the U.S. has. Very good. He's nobody has beaten him, and they're giving us a shot for the title. He's the best the U.S. has right now." He's like, "Who is he?" He said, "No, this is Sugar Ray Leonard, this guy," and gives him all the Sugar Ray info. And he looks at him and he's like, "Nah, it's all right. Just give me the fight, because after I'm done with him, after I beat him, I'm gonna be the best the U.S. has. So just make sure you give me that fight."
That's great. So he wasn't familiar with Sugar Ray Leonard going into it.
No, yo no lo conocía, ni sabía que existía.
He says he didn't know who Leonard. He didn't even know Leonard existed.
Oh, wow.
He didn't know about Leonard's existence. So imagine.
No se oía mencionar por acá, por Panamá.
Leonard was not that popular here in Panama. And so he knew very, very little to none about Sugar Ray's Leonard career. And the funny thing is that the first mistake Sugar Ray made in the first press conference was that Leonard said, "Durán is very slow and he's too slow for me." That was the same words that Cam Buchanan said years before. So what he did is that he started fighting and training sparring partners that were very fast, because his goal was to get speed and fight speed. That's why he trained with fighters that had a bigger skill in speed in boxing.
Ray was on our first episode, and we talked at length about this fight. And one of the things he said we talked a lot about was the mental strategy, the games that Roberto played, how he got in his head. Was that all predetermined? Did he decide to do that up front, or was it just instinctual, and that's just part of who Roberto Durán is, what he brought to the game?
Es que eso es natural, eso sale solo por naturaleza. Es que yo nací para ser boxeador. Yo no sé hacer más nada que boxear.
It was just natural. It's instinctive. He says that it just came out in the moment because that's his instinct. He was born to be a fighter. He doesn't know to do anything else but just fight. And it just came up in the moment.
Dile que le voy a echar una historia.
He's going to tell you a little story.
No fue con quien iba a pelear.
He says that back in one of his early fights, that he went to New York. He was very excited because he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to be in New York, big city." But then they took them out to Crossword, outside New York. And then when they got into this hotel, which was very fancy and very nice, he was very happy. But little did he know that he was going to be taken back of the hotel to this barrack where all the service people that worked in the hotel were staying. All the people that would clean, the cooks, and all that he would hear was just the plates and the silverware falling, and it was very hard for him to sleep. However, he managed to make friends with the crew of the people working in the hotel. They were most Latin people, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, very, very, very. They made a very good friendship with the help of the hotel. They were mostly Latin people.
Dile, me paraba yo como a las 3 de la mañana y la gente buscando, ¿dónde está la dura? Y te Fradibro buscando, y lo despacho. ¿Dónde está la dura? Y de repente su tipo dice, vamos a pasar por un lado para ver. Y me dieron en la cocina fregando platos y todo era para salir a correr después.
And they were like, he would get so anxious, and with the whole thing that was going on, and they would be looking for him, and they didn't find him, and they were like, "Where's Durán?" All his sparring partners and Freddie Brown, And when they saw him, he was in the kitchen doing the silverware and cleaning the dishes just before he went out running, because he was already so psychologically, psyched out with the whole thing that was going on there. He would come in the kitchen and he would be doing the dishes before doing his morning jogging sessions.
But that was part of his appeal, though, as he was really a people's champion. He was among the people, and even after the fights, again, like going back to Duran said, he wanted to be out with the people, partying and celebrating the victory with them, not just himself.
Bueno, en Panamá, cuando yo salía a beber, pues yo me llevaba a todos, invitaba a todo el mundo, mis amigos, todo el mundo salíamos a beber por ahí.
He says that, it's very him. He whenever he went out to party and celebrate, he wanted everybody to be with him, everybody being taken care of, his friends and everybody, not just in the States, but as well in Panama. He would pay for everybody. He wanted to make sure that everybody had a good time.
Dile que a mí la plata, como yo nunca he sido ambicioso a la plata, dile, por eso que yo me la gastaba. Hoy la tengo, mañana no la tengo, eso era de decirle.
He says that money to him was not a big thing. He says that if he could spend all his money making sure that everybody was all right and happy, that made him happy. Money to him was like, today I have it, tomorrow I might not. Tomorrow I might get it again. I just wanted to share with the people I want to.
Dile que yo decía a mi neta, bueno, hoy no la tengo, mañana yo la tengo.
Yeah, I have it today, maybe tomorrow no, but the day after that I might get it again. And just make sure that everybody was fine.
So, and back to the Leonard fight again. He also said, I want to talk about the Hands of Stone punching power. He said he hit me with some punches. Ray Leonard said he hit me with some punches, just unbelievable. He said he's hit me so hard and so often, I looked around to see if there were more people in the ring. So where did you get that punching power from? Again, was that just instinctual and natural, or is there a certain way you deliver your shots that add that power?
He says that obviously, there's a lot of natural force in his punches, but his technique was using his shoulder and his body. That way that when you hit your opponent, you're not just hitting him with the hand, as many of his fighters do. You hit him with your whole body in that punch. And that was his technique for his punching power.
Yo pegaba con todo el cuerpo, pegaba. Yo no pegaba solamente con la mano.
He didn't just hit with the hand. He used all his hand, all his body in that punch. And at the same token, he'd be covering himself with the same hand and his shoulders. So there was a lot of technique involved in that.
Yeah. Well, it's legendary, that punching power. After the Leonard fight, you obviously returned to Panama, and it was like a national holiday. Celebrations, parades. Did you understand at that time the impact you were having on your country, or was it just kind of, you were in the moment?
Había los días más porque eso lo planeaba Torrijos. Ese tiempo era Torrijos. Y yo me ponía contento por eso, porque era un homenaje para Roberto Durán y que el pueblo se tiraba a ver al nuevo ídolo Roberto Durán. Para mí era bien.
For him, it was all right. He didn't feel like a god or anything. He just felt like another day, because most of these celebrations were prepared by General Torrijos, who was, the general in Panama back in the day. And he was happy. However, he felt like, it's an honor to me, but it's just another day.
Now, Robin, let's take a little departure here. When you were born, at what point in your father's career, and what's your first recollection of him as a fighter?
Well, I was born, it's a funny story, because I was born in 1981, April. So I was like a celebration child from this first fight of Leonard to the second fight. That's what he tells me all the time. The first thing I do remember, though, is I was very little. For some reason, I was just maybe 2-3 years old, and I still remember flying to New York with my uncle for the Davey Moore fight. Don't ask me how I can remember that, but I do. And then, sadly, the first big memory I have of my father that I can tell you with assurance was when we were in Bahamas, because he was training for Tommy Hearns. And he was having such a difficult time making the weight. He's such a very loving and caring father. He's always hugging us and kissing us. I'm 39 years old and he still hugs me like I'm his little baby. And I remember going into the hotel room where he was all happy because, you know, we didn't see him much because he was always in training camps. We would probably come into the fight 1 week before, and we just came in the room so happy, you know, and when we opened the restroom door, the bathroom door, he was in the hot tub, like a corpse, just sucking on the lemon, trying to make their way to the fight.
Yeah,
and he
right.
told my mom, like, yeah, get the kids out. I can't see them right now. I'm dying.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that, you know,
Wow.
not the first thing, but that thing has haunted me, like, ever since I was a kid. And then obviously, then we had the good times when he fought Iron Barkley. I was in that fight as well. And I remember that I was in school and my teachers would give me little notes to take home to my mom. And as a kid, you never do as you're told. So I would open the notes and the teacher would say, Mrs. Durán, we implore you, please tell your husband not to take this fight. Your kids deserve a father. He's gonna get killed. And then we see the newspapers and they will say like, Durán walking into a massacre. Durán's old, he's washed out. He's gonna fight the guy who knocked out Tommy Hearns, knocked him out. You know, it was such a bad energy against him. And obviously that transmitted to us. And I remember when we went to Atlantic City and I saw Barkley for the first time and I looked up this huge guy and I'm like, okay, you know, this doesn't look good for that. I told my sister, Rachel. But then we're like, yeah, well, you know, you just gotta pray. And I remember that fight starting and just my mom started running like a gazelle all around the gym. It was in the Trump Plaza in the stadium. And my mom was always like very fashion and very, you know, very fine looking lady and dressed up. And she just started running all around the stadium, calling Panama, asking my grandma how the fight was going when she was inside the stadium looking at the fight. And in the 8th round, with, you know, Barkley got him with a hand, she almost fainted. Yeah. We started, but then when my dad won, it was such a big celebration. So, you know, it's been a life of so many happy and so many bad moments. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because we've had so many experiences that he has teach us about being humble to other people. Like today we could be having drinks with Robert De Niro, but then when we go back to Panama, we'll be in the hood having some beers and eating fried fish with the local people from the hoods, you know? So that's been taught to us by him. And that's one thing that I will always be thankful to my father.
Well, a lot of ups and downs in the life of a fighter, but it does affect the family. I mean, even after the Ken Buchanan fight, I mean, the sportscasters and the writers were all like, he's ferocious, he's primal, he's animalistic, all the things that are probably just the exact opposite of how you know your dad.
It's very funny that many people will think of him as just like a savage animal that goes in the ring and just kills people, but that's not him in real life. You know, there's two different Duráns that I will say that there's just split personalities. The one in the ring versus the one outside the ring. The one outside the ring is very friendly. You know, he messes up. You know, he just likes to bother people and make jokes and, you know, make sure that everybody's being taken care of. And that's the Durán that I know and that I love as father. But as a boxing fan, I love the Durán in the ring as well. So, you know, I still I start going YouTube and start seeing the old fights of my dad. And I train, you know, I was trained by his trainer as well, Promo. Yep. And I know how to skip the rope just like him and hit the speed back just like him. And it was funny that when they did the Hands of Stone movie, I had to double the actor when doing the rope scene because it's very hard thing to learn in 2 months or 2 or 3 months. You can't learn skills like that. And I've been doing that as a child, as a Durán child. My playground was not the park. My playground was the boxing gym. So I would get the ropes and I would jump on the wheels and hit the speed back. That was fun time for me.
Yeah, it's amazing the stuff you absorb just being around the sport, you know. It's funny you bring that up. I got to show this picture that I happen to have here. It's amazing how much you do look like your dad.
Yeah, I've been told.
I bet you have. I didn't think about it until you see the picture and then see you. It's like, wow.
Yeah, and it's funny that I had the honor to play. I'm an actor in Panama. I do movies and they made the theatrical play of his life and I was honored to play him. So I let my beard grow and my hair grow, and people would just look at me. And then Leonard, the first time I saw Leonard after, I don't know, maybe 20 years, he was coming in with his cell phone talking, and I stood up to him and I'm like, "Hey, Ray," and he looks at me, he's like, "Holy."
Uncanny,
I'm like, "Yeah,
is.
it's me, Robert." He's like, "Oh, you look just so much like a fire. I'm having so much flashback right now."
Yeah.
But you know, it's fun, and I'm named just like him, and so are my other brothers. We have the same name, Roberto Durán, and he named my brother Chavo and myself Roberto Durán, just like him. So we have no middle names or anything. It's just like him.
So you got the name and the looks. That's a good combination. I do want to go back and talk about this fight, the fight with Davey Moore, because it came at an interesting point in your career. You know, probably coming off of a low point in your career after the Leonard fight, but you bounced back. So, what intestinal fortitude? What motivated you to come back, take a fight against a younger guy, a bigger guy, and do what you were able to do against him?
Me acuerdo muy bien, estábamos en Nueva York, en un restaurante que se llama Víctor Café, y entró Suleiman, había entrado a Víctor Café a comer.
That all came about. They were in New York in a restaurant called Victor's Cafe, which was very familiar to him, and it's almost like family. And he was just eating there, and then Mauricio Sulaiman comes into the restaurant, and he tells Victor, the owner of the restaurant, who was like a father to him, "Can you tell Sulaiman that I want to talk to him and I want to fight for a title?" So then he goes out and he talks to Sulaiman. He tells him, "Okay, you know, just give me a title shot. Give me a title shot, please." And he's like, all right, Durán. I will give you a title shot, but you gotta promise me that if you lose, you retire. And he told him, "No problem, because not only are you gonna have to give me the fight, you're gonna have to give me other fights because I'm gonna beat this guy."
Entonces, ahora viene lo bueno. Todo el mundo en Panamá me dice que me iban a matar, que si estaba loco, porque la comisión de boxeo de Panamá no me dejara pelear y que esas cosas. Entonces viene Luis de Cuba y me llama y me dice, duramente para Miami a entrenar acá de tu oponente, lo de Panamá para que le calle la boca a todo eso.
And then when the word got out that this fight was going to happen, people in Panama were saying Durán is crazy, and they were doing submissions for the Panama Boxing Commission not to let him fight against Davey Moore because he was going to get killed and massacred and all that. So then a friend of his calls him and tells him, "Durán, come to Miami. I'm going to get you the sparring partners, and we're going to set up a training camp for you to fight and beat this guy." That's what he did. He went out of Panama. He moved out of Panama and trained for this fight outside Panama.
Dile que yo entrenaba con botas de soldado. Arriba del ring corría con botas de soldado a fortalecer los pies y los brazos.
He would train with military boots, soldier boots, on the ring and on the beach just to make his legs stronger.
Y andaba 24 horas con la bota puesta.
And he will be wearing these heavy boots 24 hours a day.
Y después le compré esos saquitos de arena que no se ponen a mano. Y andaba con esos saquitos de arena para fortalecer más la pierna.
And then he will have the little sandbags, that like the gloves that you put on the hand, and just walking around on a daily basis with weight on him, and just to get stronger and be light for whenever he took them out, he will be light on his feet.
Y eso a la vez te va poniendo fuerte y te da velocidad también.
And that will give you be strong and you will be fast.
Así que cuando yo subí al ring, estaba con una pluma ahí.
That's why then when he got in the ring, he felt like a feather moving around, and he was, just flowing.
Well, it's interesting that in the beginning of Roberto's career, everybody avoided him. In the latter half of his career, he was constantly the underdog, but beat the odds many times. And that fight is a great example of that. And again, even though Davey Moore was younger, 24 years old, he just slowly and methodically broke him down. Along with his defensive skills was also his infighting ability. Roberto was, I think, highly underrated for that. His ability to stay inside, and you hear a lot about, again, Lomachenko or Mayweather Jr. and their ability to infight and use some of those skills. But I mean, he was really able to control his opponents, control their arms and their hands, slap their punches away, hit him over the top. Put his head right in at their shoulder to kind of gain space. Again, was that instinctual or learned? And talk us through some of those techniques that you use to really gain the edge in fighting.
Porque yo, cada vez que yo peleaba, yo buscaba cada vez que yo peleaba, o peleo actualmente hasta la calle, yo tengo mucha defensa.
All those defense techniques that he had were self-taught. Nobody taught him that. He learned as he fought. That's instinct and natural instinct for him. And even if he would go into a street fight right now, he's very, very wise. And none of that was being taught to him. He just instantly learned them. And he knew how to fight, different fight every time. That depending on how his opponent will come to fight him, he will use his strategy and his defense, because all fighters have different ways of fighting. So he knew how to fight the guy's fight and impose his fight on the other opponent.
Dile que yo hoy en día hay mucha gente que mira la pelea de los boxeadores para aprender. Yo no veía videos, yo no veía nada. Yo en cada asalto yo salía diferente, porque tenía muchas formas de pelear en cada asalto.
So many fighters look at tapes and videos of their opponents. He never did that. He never looked at the other guy's fight unless it was somebody that he would know. But every round for him was a studying round of his opponent. Mm-hmm. He would come out and fight him a different fight every single round.
That's interesting. That's an interesting technique. Any fighter that wants to learn how to infight should go back and watch your fights on YouTube. I mean, they're masterful. The way you hold the guy's hand so he can't throw with it.
I still do that.
Huh?
I still do that. I was actually seeing Palomino's fight against him 2 nights ago, and it was just artistry. It was the way he would feint the opponents, fake him out with the jab and then turn that jab into hook. It was just artistry.
Yeah, I mean, just those little nuances that you don't pick up on when you're just watching a fight. But if you go back and really study it, there's just some amazing work going on there. I want to talk about one final fight. That, of course, is the 37 years old. You come back to fight Iran Barkley, who was coming off of a sensational knockout over Thomas Hearns. And again, probably you came in as the underdog. It was February 1984, 4 divisions above where you debuted at. For the WBC middleweight championship. You heard him in the very first round. Talk to us about that fight and that moment.
That you're going to start with the way he took the fight. He was in Miami, and some random guy tells him, like, hey, Durán, you want a shot for the title? And he's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, just bring it. As so many people that get to him offering fights as usual. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure, just bring it. And a week after that, the guy says, like, Durán, I have the title fight with Barkley. Are you willing to take the fight with Barkley? And he's like, sure, why not? Yeah, let's do this. And he's like, are you sure you want to take this fight? I mean, this guy is some serious stuff. And he's like, bring the guy over, I'm going to beat him. So then they took him to this very fancy restaurant where they had this huge stage, and there were a lot of rich people. And they asked him, Durán, do you want to have something to drink? Do you want a beer? And he's like, bring the beer over. Yeah, let's have the drink, the beer.
Entonces, el tipo me dice a mí, si tú le ganas a Barkley, yo te regalo un reloj de oro. Le digo, hey, ten el reloj de oro que lo voy a venir a buscar el día siguiente.
And then one of the guys tells him, like, Durán, if you beat Barkley, I'm going to give you a golden watch. And he's like, started laughing. He's like, you make sure you have that watch, because the day after I beat Barkley, I'm going to come for my watch. You better have my watch.
Y el tipo, después, cuando yo me gano a David Moore, a Barkley, yo quería venir más rápido a buscar mi reloj de oro. Porque el tipo era dueño de una joyería.
¿Ah? ¿Eres de Juvenil?
No, Juvenil no, otro. Bueno, para no echarte el cuento, el tipo me dice, Durán, no pierdas, porque si tú pierdes, tú me arruinas. Y después el otro dice, yo voy a apostar también, pero si tú me pierdes, me va a arruinar. Y entre cada uno, me contaron ellos, apostaron $1 million cada uno.
And then, this was very wealthy people. And all he was thinking was like, I want to get my watch. He's like a little kid. He's like, I'm gonna get my watch. But then the guys became their friends, his friends, and they were owners of jewelry stores. And they told him like, Duran, my money's on you. I'm gonna put everything I have, and between them, each of them put $1 million for that fight. And he was on the underdog in that fight, so the odds were against him. So if you bet in favor to him, you get your money back big time. So each of these guys, they bet $1 million on him. And he's like, Duran, you got to make sure you win, because if you lose, I'm ruined. My whole life, my whole money, it's on you. And then they did. And then he won the fight.
Y entonces, para que tú veas cómo es la psicología, a mí se me grabaron los 3 millones de que cada uno iba a apostar por $1 millón cada uno. Y yo corría con mi mente diciendo, yo tengo que ganar, esos tipos tienen que ganar su $1 millón. Yo corría, y esa era mi mente.
And then you know how his mind started working, like, I can't fail these guys. I mean, their lives are on me. And he was running, thinking like, I gotta win this fight. These guys, they can't lose their money. They cannot lose their money. They become my friends. I gotta win for them.
Eso, cuando uno se lo dice, eso te cría una psicología que tú no puedes perder, porque tú estás pensando que si tú pierdes, el tipo va a perder $1 millón cada uno. Y eso te pone mal. Y yo entrenaba duro para ganar, para que todo el tipo tuviera cada uno su $1 millón. Y yo me acuerdo que uno me regaló una sortilla de oro, el otro me regaló una esclava de oro. Y yo feliz de la vida.
And then, you know, he would be running and training because he didn't want to fail the guys. He didn't want to feel guilty for having these guys lose this whole bunch of money. And then when he won, they gave him a bunch of jewelry and rings and all that stuff. But psychologically, his mind was his mindset was that he couldn't lose because he didn't want to ruin this guy's lives.
Well, you thrived under that extra pressure, it seems like.
Right.
I want read a quote that Roberto said, and I'll break it down so you can translate as I go. He said, "Fame doesn't make me any different. I'm the same man now who grew up in the hard streets of Panama. I am just myself."
Dice que quiere una frase que usted dijo una vez que dice, la fama no me hace a mí. Yo soy un hombre que nació en las calles de Panamá. Soy yo.
Sí. Porque la verdad, a mí la fama no se me ha subido a la cabeza. Yo sigo siendo la misma persona, que no cambia.
Fame hasn't gotten to his head. He's still the same person and he won't change.
Dile que yo he visto mucho. Dile a él que yo conozco muchas personas que salen en 2 o 3 películas y a los tipos se creen que tanto hombre como él ya se creen que son lo máximo en películas y a mí me da igual.
He says, you've seen so many people. He says, I've seen so many people that have been in 1 or 2 movies and they just think they're all that and they're the greatest thing on earth. I don't let fame change me. I'm just myself.
Dile a él que le voy a decir una cosa.
¿Él va a decir algo?
Dile que le voy a decir una cosa.
Yeah, he tells you one thing else.
Me invita, fuimos para la cosa de la película.
He says that speaking of fame and all that, when we were in the tour for the Hands of Stone movie, we were in Cannes, France, and there was a special dinner held for Robert De Niro. That night, it was Mick Jagger was there, it was Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire and Usher and all these Main Street celebrities were there. And then De Niro was talking to my dad, and Leonardo DiCaprio comes up to De Niro and tells him, I started talking, and De Niro tells him, who's that man? That's Roberto Durán. And Leonardo DiCaprio's like, oh my God, that's Durán. Oh my God. And then they started talking about movies because he's a very crazy fanatic of the movie. And then he tells Leonardo, like, can I take a picture with you? And DiCaprio tells him, no, I want a picture with you. And then Tobey Maguire comes in the conversation and he tells him, you're a very little guy. And he tells him like, hey, Spider-Man, I can just squash you with one hand. You're very little. And then they started having this very good conversation with Tobey Maguire, and it was a very fun night. Yeah. It was a very fun night.
Your humility is part of what is your appeal and your charm. So I just want to wrap it up by saying, Roberto, you fought for a nation. You fought for boxing fans around the world. You fought the best of the days. You made the name Roberto Durán a legacy that is written in history books and will last in images of pure ring mastery forever. And as a boxing fan, I want to tell you thank you. We appreciate you and how honored we are to have you in our midst.
And he wants to thank you and thank everybody who's going to be watching this conversation. Thank you so much for supporting his career throughout all these years, and he's very grateful to be here with you today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time and the conversation. We'll see you soon.
Bye now.